Welcome to the Tournament Poker Edge podcast, brought to you by TournamentPokerEdge.com, the only podcast dedicated exclusively to poker tournament strategy. Now here's your host, Clayton Fletcher.
Hello once again, everybody, and welcome to the Tournament Poker Edge podcast. I'm your host, Clayton Fletcher in New York City. I'd like to start off this episode by thanking those of you who are Spotify users for rating our podcast 5 stars. It means so much, especially now that the Spotify platform is finally allowing ratings. I don't think you can write any words. I don't think you can say, oh, Clayton is so sexy and I love him so much and I wish I could have his babies. I don't think you're actually able to say that specifically, but I know that you're able to give us 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 stars. And those of you who are giving us 5 stars, it means the world, especially because this is a new thing and we're skyrocketing to the top of the Spotify poker charts, as it were. If you are considering giving 3 or 4 or some other number of stars besides 5, we would actually appreciate it if you did not do that, because all that really matters is how close we are to 5.0. So you might feel like you're doing us a solid if you say, well, we'll give you 4 because nobody's perfect. No, that's not the way this type of rating system works. It's basically 5 or 0. So, thank you guys for that. It means the world. Also, thanks for all of the kind remarks and comments on our most recent episode, which featured Danny Sprung, who is obviously a very insightful guy, coming from the investment background, the financial background, doing stocks, options for so many years. I really enjoyed our conversation with him, and I guarantee he'll be back on sometime soon in the near future, or maybe not the near future, but the future nonetheless. And yeah, today I want to just, get into it. There's a lot going on in poker. This week, Alex Duvall uploaded a video where he was studying the live stream, the Hustler live stream, which is really cool. California has always been the world leader in local card rooms having their own stream. Obviously, you guys remember all of the episodes that we dedicated to the developing story of Mike Postle, who, as far as I know, is basically out of poker, either by his own volition or out of simply fear of being pummeled to death the next time he walks into a card room. But all of those videos were from the Stones Casino, which is in California. And of course, Live at the Bike, probably the original local card room showing cash games live on a stream. Even before we called it a stream back in the day, Live at the Bike is old school, the original and best. And then we've got Hustler Live, which is the newest and sleekest, one of the coolest live streams that you will find anywhere. I have to say, I don't understand the people who think they'll be able to get away with cheating on a streamed poker event where people are watching you play. There are cameras everywhere. We had an example. Alex Duvall uploaded this video from the Hustler live stream. It involves a player by the name of Skillsrocks. Now, that's a stupid name for apparently a pretty stupid guy. He's very clearly cheating on this live stream, and he's also a total tool. And I don't often call my fellow humans tools, but this guy really deserves it. If you haven't seen it yet, go on YouTube and just Google Alex Duvall, and it'll probably come right up for you. But anyway, in the first example that Alex points out, I don't actually believe any cheating took place. It's between this guy, Skillsrocks, again, what a terrible name, and his friend, who is a regular on the stream as well. And they get into a hand where they are both all in, or an all-in bet has been made, and the friend is trying to decide whether to call Skillsrocks' all in. So a conversation takes place, and he says, I have queen 6, and even shows it. Queen 6 suited. Now, why you're considering calling a $10,000 all-in bet before the flop with queen 6 suited, I don't really know, but, welcome to Southern California, I guess. So, Skillsrocks is already all in for more than that, and the other player has to decide whether to call or not. And it's a little bit scummy what happens next. I don't actually consider it cheating, but Skillsrocks tells him, you have one overcard. Now, Skillsrocks has pocket jacks. So obviously he wants the action. He tells him, if you call, we can run it twice. He says, why? Do you have ace jack? Why do you want to run it twice? You probably have queen jack. To which Skillsrocks responds, no, I promise you, I swear, dude, you have one overcard. Now, to me, I don't know what else that could have meant. To me, that means I have pocket jacks, or pocket tens, or pocket nines, right? When you have one overcard, you have 30% equity. And so he's being very honest with him. Now, the commentators say, oh, this isn't cool. This is pretty scummy. I thought these two guys were friends and all this kind of nonsense. But I don't know what they thought he was intimating with the comment that he has one overcard. So I'm thinking, okay, so this is not a Mike Postle situation here. There's no cheating going on. This is a scummy California dude in a sweatshirt doing scummy things, but certainly not in the realm of cheating. But what happens next in the video, and again, I recommend you guys watch this video, there's a player that keeps exposing his hole cards, and Skillsrocks is trying to alert his other friend as to the player who is exposing his cards. He's trying to tell his friend what that player has. So that's not cool. He's like kicking him under the table, and he's making ridiculous folds, and he makes a few ridiculous bluffs because this guy, the player in question, is named Glenn. Or no, actually, I think it's Gary. Gary, Glenn, some kind of G name. Anyway, he's got a problem protecting his hand. So, a few takeaways from this. Number one, if you're in a cash game, whether it's live streamed or not, whether you want your 15 minutes of fame or not, whether you think it would be cool to play in a high stakes cash game on a live stream or not, if you have even the slightest suspicion that any of your opponents are colluding or working together in any way at all, it's a cash game, get up and leave. And the thing about this guy, I think his name is Gary now, he's suspicious of that. He's like, I don't know what y'all are up to, but I don't like it. And he says this pretty early on in the stream. And yet he continues to play with them. Now, if I'm in a cash game and I don't like what's happening, I will actually pick up my chips and go. I mean, you're in Southern California. Just go to another casino. Okay, maybe you won't get to play on YouTube, but who cares? Is it worth getting cheated just to be on YouTube? So anyway, he knows something's up, and he never quite does figure it out. I can tell you guys, one time I was in, I believe, Las Vegas, but it could have been Los Angeles. Anyway, I was playing somewhere, and two guys were speaking German at the table. Now, first sign that you're in a bad poker game is if anybody at the table knows German. Okay, so I probably should have picked up as soon as I heard the first Sprechen Sie whatever, but I did not. But I did eventually pick up because the two guys would discuss the hands after the hands in German. Now I think this may have been at the Rio because no one ever enforces the rules there. If you are in a poker room in America, the rules in every poker room that I know of in America state very explicitly only English may be spoken at the table. Now, somehow, this rule only ever seems to be enforced by anyone, rarely, and even then, it's only when the players have cards. Now, I don't care if you have cards or not. It's not fair to me if you guys can talk about strategy or whatever you want, tell each other what you had after each hand, and I don't understand what you're saying. Cards or not, English only at the table. Now, like I always say, when there's ever any kind of shady dealings or anything that's inappropriate at the table, I always say the dealer should have followed procedure. Now, what the dealer is supposed to do, anytime a dealer hears players speaking a language that isn't English in a casino in America playing poker, they should tell that player, sorry, sir, but you must speak English only while at the table. If you'd like to speak German, you guys are welcome to step away from the table. But while you're seated at the table, whether you have cards or not, it's English only. Unfortunately, if it happens again, I will have to notify my supervisor. And that should cut it out right then and there. Nip it in the bud, and then we can all get on with the game. So when this happened years ago, it was certainly in Las Vegas, I remember now. I asked them myself, because the dealer didn't do anything, I said, hey guys, would you mind not speaking German at the table? And they got defensive with me. Like, hey, we're not cheating or anything. We don't even have cards. I'm just talking to my friend. You know, that's our language. We speak it. Okay, look, I said, look, we speak English here. So I'm asking you nicely not to speak German anymore. And now I was up in this game and I was running like God. I kind of had the feeling these two guys didn't particularly like me, and that I suspected they may or may not be talking about how they could best go about trying to beat me in future hands. Now, maybe that's my own paranoia, maybe it's not, but the point is, I'll never know because I didn't speak their language well enough. I only know a few words of German, and most of them are not. Maybe we should cold 4-bet this lag more often. I don't know how to say that in German, okay? So anyway, I decided to move, and I left the game, and they were mad. They were like, why are you leaving? You know, it's a hit and run and all this kind of stuff. I said, look, I told you guys twice, I don't want to hear any German. And they're like, no, we'll stop. I was like, no, I told you twice, I'm just going to go. And so I think they were mad, and they thought I did a hit and run because I was at that table for less than an hour. But look, number one, there's no rule that states you can't hit and run. It's kind of frowned upon, but it's obviously not against the rules. It's a cash game, which means I can come and go as I please. And number two, I'm not obligated to stay here if you're not going to follow the rules. So bye-bye. Anyway, protect your hand at all costs. If you're not sure whether or not you are doing a good job of hiding your hands from the gaze of your opponents, have a friend of yours sit next to you at the kitchen table and try to peek at your cards. Grab 2 cards out of the deck and try to hide them from a friend who is sitting right next to you on either side of you, if you are not sure that you are doing a good job of protecting your hand. I've done this before, and people actually laugh. There is no way I could ever see those 2 cards, Clayton. They are so well hidden. So I'm pretty happy with my technique when it comes to peeking at my own hole cards as they're dealt. Anyway, definitely check out that video. You know, we all love a good cheating scandal. Apparently, this guy has been banned not only from the Hustler live stream, but also from Hustler Casino itself. And I just would applaud everyone who had a hand in making that decision. And big ups to Alex Duvall for uncovering this and sharing it with the rest of us. All right, let's get back into what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago, which is Clayton Fletcher's World Series of Poker main event. When we last left our hero, he was getting started on day 2, where he started with a short stack and doubled up. So let's keep it going here. We're still on day 2. We are now at the second level of the day, which is the 500, 1,000, 1,000 level. And we have 45,000, which is still below the 60,000 starting stack, and actually quite well below the average stack, which now is approaching 100K. So yeah, about almost half the players are gone by the middle of day 2. So yeah, we're getting to that point. So it's probably like right around 100,000 at this point. So we have a very, very loose, very, very aggressive, way out of line, pretty insane amateur opponent who opens from the cutoff to 2,200. He's got about 100,000 behind, so an average stack for him. And hero Clayton on the button holding the Ace of Hearts and 5 of Clubs. Okay, so what do we want to do? Well, we got to take a look at the blinds first to really make a good decision here. And the blinds have been pretty well ABC. And what I mean by that is they tend to play by the book, nothing too fancy, not particularly aggressive. basic, tight, aggressive strategy that you would find in any poker book written in the mid-2000s. So that's kind of what we're up against here on the left. So my choices are to call and play in position with the ace-5 offsuit versus this guy's range, which probably consists of, 80% of the deck, if not more. Or I can fold because there are two players yet to act on my left. I do know that I'm probably ahead of the original raiser's range for sure, but what about these guys on the left? Somebody could wake up, so you can take the conservative route and throw your hand away. What I decide to do is to 3-bet, and it's not just as a bluff or whatever. This is actually for value. I make it 8,000 to go, and I'm hoping to get called by worse. So obviously I want the blinds to fold. If they participate in this hand, then I'm very much crushed. But yeah, the original raiser is capable of raising and then calling a big 3-bet with, a hand as bad as like 7-4 suited. So yeah, this is pure value here. Also, I don't mind at all if he does want to find the fold button, but he hasn't seen it much all day, so we're not too optimistic about that. We're trying to get involved against a bad player in position with a superior holding in an effort to get back into contention for the championship bracelet. So let's go. We make it 8,000, and thankfully the blinds fold, and also thankfully our opponent decides to call. So we're loving this. We are exploiting our opponent's tendency to open everything, and even after he calls, we very likely still have the better hand. So the pot is 18,500, and the flop comes 6 of hearts, tray of clubs, deuce of diamonds. Hero holding the ace of hearts, 5 of clubs for an overcard and a gut shot. So our opponent checks, and now the first decision is, do we want to bet? And the second decision is, if so, how much? Is this a spot for a c-bet? I mean, I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe we can c-bet here and take it down some of the time. But, this player was so loose, I feel like he might even call us with a hand like Queen Jack or Ace 7. I don't know if we can really get a better hand to fold. We can get value from that c-bet, believe it or not. He might call us with like a King Jack, Queen Jack type of hand. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really see too much value in c-betting here. I imagine a solver might say that we have enough equity to c-bet as a semi-bluff. And yeah, I don't hate betting, but when my opponent is this loose, I'd probably rather just try to go ahead and make a hand. Also, he's not that aggressive post-flop, so I expect him to not bluff me. So I might be able to win the pot with ace high. I'm not particularly worried about getting bluffed. Again, this is a amateur opponent. So we both check. And now the turn comes, the queen of clubs, and with 18,500 in the middle, our opponent now leads out for 5,000. Now this is somewhat optional. We've already put in 8,000 of our 45,000 stack, which is almost 20%. So that's something to consider here. Maybe when we're 3-betting before the flop, we should consider how deep into this do we really want to go, especially when all we have is a gut shot and an overcard. So now he's only betting 5,000, which is a tiny bet. After he bets it, there's 23,500 in the middle, and it only costs us 5,000 to call. So we're getting 4.5 to 1. And to me, that price is just plain irresistible, particularly when we have probable implied odds. Again, this opponent does not like to fold. So if we make this straight, or if we make a pair of aces, we can probably get a little extra value for our winning hand in those instances. So because of all of that, I decide to go ahead and make the call. I also could consider raising as a semi-bluff. You guys know I love to pounce on smallish bets because they tend to show a lack of strength. We know that larger bets are generally more polarized. So when players are at the top of their ranges, they tend to bet bigger. So these small bets obviously also will mostly consist of weaker ranges, and that's as it should be, although occasionally you might want to bet a very small amount with the nuts just so that you're not so predictable and exploitable and everything else. But under these circumstances versus this opponent, I didn't feel like shoving or raising, planning to fold to a re-raise made a lot of sense. Number one, I have too much equity. And number two, I have an opponent who doesn't like to fold. So I tend to not bluff very much versus loose, passive type of guys. Obviously, he's not that passive. He's betting 5,000 here with something. But yeah, I'm just not ready to let it go, and I didn't really want to raise it. So that leaves calling, and let's see the river. It's the Jack of Clubs for a final board of 6 of Hearts, Trey of Clubs, Deuce of Diamonds, Queen of Clubs, Jack of Clubs. So the flush came in. Nothing else really came in, but the backdoor flush got there. And now our opponent checks. Okay, well, there's 28,500 out there sitting out there for me to possibly take a stab at. And I think that this is a very, very close decision. Against most normal human players, if you look at what's happened so far, the guy raised and then called a 3-bet pre-flop, checked it on the turn, checked it on the flop, bet tiny on the turn, and now checked the river. So I think under normal conditions, we should go ahead and bet this card quite often and for a pretty large amount, because the scare card has come in and our opponent checked it. So most players would end up folding quite often if we decide to bet this river, especially when they have medium strength hands. And again, only betting 5,000 on the turn, this opponent is very likely to have a medium to low strength hand. So that is the argument for betting. But guys, you may be surprised, I still decided to check give up behind. Number one, it's not a pure give up because there's still some chance that ace high is good. But the bigger factor to me is that I've seen this opponent make call after call after call, and I just don't expect to be able to bluff him successfully often enough to make doing so profitable. I mean, if I bet half the pot here, it needs to work like a third of the time, and I don't think it will, guys. I really don't. I think that it's going to get called too often, even by relatively weak hands. So that then the question becomes, do I want to bet more and try to force him off of whatever he has? Well, now it just becomes a risk to reward ratio. And I think that the play here is to check, give up. Every so often, ace high will be good, but most of the time our opponent will show a medium strength hand that probably would not have folded very often to a river bluff. I mean, I could shove because our opponent will almost definitely not ever have the flush, but the problem is when he has something to call with and can find the call button, which seems to be his favorite button of all, then we're out of the tournament. So that didn't seem like a good value proposition to me. And so because of all of that, I decided to check behind, and the opponent ends up winning the hand with the 8 of diamonds, 6 of diamonds. So he flopped top pair on the flop and then bet small for some odd reason on the turn and then gave up on the river. And I do not know whether a big bluff would have worked on the end. I'm sure it would have worked against you, dear listener, but you were not my opponent in that hand. Okay, so let's continue and do another one from the main event. Same level, 500, 1,000 with a 1,000 ante, but things have improved for us. Despite losing the hand we just discussed, I managed to get my stack up to 50,000. So we're doing okay. We've got 50 big blinds. You got to love the main event, right? It's like I'm still well below the average stack and even below the starting stack on day 2, and yet I have 50 big blinds. There really is no tournament in the world quite like the main event. Also, our M is 20, so we're in good shape here. Folds to us in the hijack holding the Jack of Clubs and 10 of Hearts. We decide to open small, just made it 2,100. And in the small blind, a Spanish player who has been, pretty sticky, pretty tricky, pretty slicky, not the easiest guy to play against. He seems like a decent European player, a little on the overly aggressive side. He makes it 8,000, and it folds back to me. When deciding what to do, I remembered kind of making a note of one of this player's interesting tendencies, which I've seen him several times having taken the lead pre-flop. I've seen him bet the flop and then check give up on the turn. So there are some players that will hardly ever do more than one continuation bet. So for us, as good players, we know, right, guys, that you need to sometimes have two barrels in your gun when you are firing out that C bet. You have to know there are certain cards that could come that would cause me to fire another barrel in case this one gets called. And then, of course, an even smaller range of hands where you would actually fire that third barrel with nothing. So when you're bluffing, it's either one barrel, two barrels, or three barrels, not including whatever you did before the flop. And some players don't really click that second barrel quite often enough. And from what I've noticed from this player, now that it's been nearly 4 hours of play, he seems to be the type that will try one shot and then give up. So that really factored into my decision to go ahead and make the call here for 5,900 more. Another thing I noticed was that the tournament director was announcing that it was time for the second break of the day, meaning that we were about to take 20 minutes and go have a cigarette, go to the bathroom, whatever. So that made me think that could affect the way this hand ends up being played. Generally speaking, most players don't like to play 5, 6, 8, 10-minute pots during a break. So if he doesn't have much, he might be even less inclined to stay involved in the hand than he normally is after the flop. So let's see what happens on the flop. There's 18,000 in the middle, and it comes Jack of Diamonds, 7 of Spades, 5 of Hearts. So Jack, 7, 5, Rainbow, Hero holding the Jack of Clubs, 10 of Hearts. And the small blind does that good old continuation bet that we have come to expect from him. He bets 7,000 into the 18,000 pot. Now, I, of course, am not folding top pair. And for you, you might say, well, there's no decision here on this flop, Clayton. What are you even thinking about? Of course, it's an obvious call. You may be surprised how often the solvers will have us raising with top pair on the flop. A lot more than most of us do, and way more than the conventional wisdom of how to play one pair types of hands would suggest. Now, I'm not sure whether that would be impacted by the fact that this guy has actually 3-bet before the flop, which should indicate generally a stronger range than had he just called, of course. My point is that the computer robots who are now leading the way in poker, the robots say none of us are raising enough on the flop with just top pair. So, I mean, I can see why on a board like this, it might be useful to do so. I mean, there's already 18,000 in the middle, and I started this hand with 50,000. So my SPR is just over 2. It's about 2.3. So it might be worthwhile to try to end the hand now. I don't want to see any types of overcards to my pair of jacks because I probably won't be able to fold. But it's not going to be fun to call and lose the main event because a king hits on the turn or something like that. So there is merit to raising, yet I just decided to call because I want to keep all of those bluffs in. I'm just hoping to not see anything higher than a jack on the turn. So I call the 7,000, and now there is 32,000 in the middle, and we have only 35,000 behind. So now our SPR after calling is just over 1. And the turn comes the deuce of clubs. So our board is now Jack, 7, 5, deuce, badoogie, and we have the Jack 10 offsuit still holding top pair. Opponent checks. Now, in this spot, we can bet or we can check behind. Remember the read of the opponent. He likes to do one c-bet and then give up. Now, that's what's happening here. He appears to be giving up. I don't know how much of a calling range he has after c-betting for 1/3 pot and then checking on the turn. But I have a feeling that that is a very small range and that with most of his value hands, he would have bet again on the turn. And because I've seen this pattern so many times, I think that I can surmise that this player's range will consist primarily of hands like ace king and ace queen. So with that in mind, I decided to take the risk and just check it behind. Now, I only have an SPR of just over 1, but my problem is I don't think I can get much value from ace king or ace queen. I don't know what the solver thinks, but in practice, many players, after I call the flop, they're not going to call my bet on the turn unless that bet is pretty small. So I suppose the play could be just to put out like a 20% of the pot bet, trying to get value from worse hands, such as ace king or pocket sixes or something else random like that. But I did opt to go for the check here. And the reason why, I didn't have the sense that my opponent had very much at all, and I wanted to go for value on the river. Remember, river bets are way easier to call for all of us than turn bets because you don't have to worry about any more bets after the call. When you call on the river, the hand is over. So players tend to be much looser with their river calls than they are with their turn calls, myself included. So that's why I checked it back. The river comes the tray of diamonds for a final board of Jack, 7, 5, deuce, tray. So a couple of straights came in, ace 4, 6, 4, both got there. Our opponent checks again, and I decide to fire into this 32,000 pot. I decided to bet 6,000. In a cash game, I would never bet this amount, but in tournaments where every chip is so valuable and so precious, I just wanted to make sure that I would get that call from a hand like ace queen, ace king, possibly even king queen, or maybe even a little bit worse than that, because there's just such little risk to my opponent. I want to make sure I get that call and possibly even induce a check raise, which I would probably have to call now that more than half of my stack is already in the middle. I'm not planning to fold top pair against an aggressive opponent who check raises me on the end. So I'm hoping in a way that he does that, although it won't be the easiest call I ever made. I'm not planning to fold if I get check raised here. So I just bet the 6,000. I figure worst case scenario, he makes a curious call. And best case scenario, he ends up bluffing some amount of chips to me on the end. I feel good about my bet, and I'm waiting for him to decide. He doesn't look happy, but he shrugs and calls, and jacks are good. I don't know what he had, but my pair of jacks wins the pot. And for the first time since 3 hours into day one, I now officially have over the starting stack, now that we're halfway through day 2 of the main event 2021 edition. Well, that'll do it for this episode. I just want to thank you guys for your continued support of this podcast. Definitely hit me up on Twitter at Clayton Comic. Let me know what you think of my decisions, how I played these pots. I'm very open to all of your input and your thoughts and your suggestions. Anybody who wants to run any of these hands through a solver, it's always interesting to hear what the solvers have to say. And the place to do that is on Twitter at Clayton Comic. And also, don't forget about our promo code. If you want to sign up for a membership at tournamentpokeredge.com, you can save $10 off your first month just by using the promo code podcast at checkout. So for everyone here at TPE, I'm Clayton Fletcher. Thank you so much for listening.
I wanna hold them like they do in Texas plays. hold 'em, let 'em hit me, raise it, baby, stay with me. Log in, intuition, play the cards with babes to start. And after she's been hooked, I'll play the one that's on her heart. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I'll get her heart, show her what I got. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I'll get her heart, show her what I got. Can't read mine, no she can't read a mile. Poker face, she's got to love nobody. Can't read mine, no she can't read a mile. Poker face, she's got to love nobody. Poker face, poker face. Poker face, poker face. I wanna roll with her, a hard pair we will be. While little gambling is fun when you're with me. I love it. Russian roulette is not the same without a gun. And baby, when it's love, it's not rough, it isn't fun.